Welcome to episode number 125 of the Marine Layer podcast. We have our two Mariners storylines, what these last 5 series wins say about this team, and we'll also discuss Mitch Garver's performance at the plate so far this season. We'll go down on the farm and pick out a standout Mariners minor leaguer. We have our Russell Wilson Umpire of the Week, and we'll close out the show with Speak Your Mind.
This show's brought to you by our friends at Pagotcha's Pub 85, the best spot in Kirkland to go hang out with your friends, have some great food, drinks, and watch all the games you want to watch. There's more than 20 TVs in that place. There's plenty of games for you to go, hang out, and sit and watch, all while you're playing darts or playing pool or just sitting and relaxing. It's the whole 9 yards. And if you want to go during happy hour, there's great drink specials. You've heard us talk about it. We'll tell you again. It's 2 to 6 p.m. on Monday through Friday. Awesome specials. $3 domestic beers, $4 mayonnaise and Blue Moons, $4 Mac and Jacks, $4 Wells, and $4 house wines. That is all over at Pagotcha's Pub 85 in Kirkland. And your reminder to not miss any of our content. Make sure you're downloading these episodes. If you're listening, leave a 5-star review, leave a written review. It all helps. If you're watching on YouTube, you guys see the subscribe button. Just take a second and click it. Give the video a like, leave a comment. What do you want to hear? All that stuff. And then on social media, we're on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube Shorts at Marine Layer Pod.
Let's get it rolling.
The pitch from Acevedo. A drive deep to right field. Down the line. The Mariners win this game 2-1. The dream lives. They're going to the playoffs. 1-1 from Jansen. There you go. Left field. We got a tie ball game. Julio. Oh, baby, what a moment. Tie ball game is 7-7.
And we welcome you to this episode of the Marine Layer podcast, part of the Just Baseball Podcast Network. Recording here on Thursday afternoon, May 2nd, another Friday episode and another series win. This one, the most impressive so far in this 2024 season.
I thought the season was over.
It was like 2 weeks ago, but hey, dog, it's been a new season. So
Yeah, now they're winning the World Series.
They had a season where they clinched the first overall pick, and then the next season they win the World Series. So it's honestly the best of both worlds.
They could not have clinched the first overall pick in the first half of April. There's no way.
Whoa. They clinched the first overall pick based on vibes alone.
Well, hey, it's a draft lottery now, so maybe they did get the first pick if you just base it off the first 2 weeks of April.
Hey, listen, even if you're an absolutely terrible team, some of these teams can't actually get top 10 picks, so someone's got to pick up there. Like the White Sox,
yeah,
they can't pick in the top 10 this year. So the Mariners' bad vibes of the first 2 weeks of the season swoop in and take that first overall pick instead.
Incredible. Well, the A's aren't getting the number 1 pick. They've tanked multiple years in a row, have the worst record in baseball, and never get the number 1 pick.
Right, so the White Sox and the A's cannot pick in the top 10.
It's almost like
you can't pick in the top 10 3 drafts in a row.
Yeah, that's right. Well,
it would have been nice if Major League Baseball jumped in and stopped the Orioles from getting so many good players, and then we could talk about the Mariners' path through the American League a little bit easier if the
Orioles weren't loaded. Yeah.
That would be very helpful.
Well, it's almost like the MLB draft lottery isn't so random after all. Maybe it's fixed, just like the NBA draft lottery's fixed, but that's a topic for another day.
I think it would make the league infinitely more entertaining if we were freezing draft cards and purposely shutting teams out of the lottery just based on, who we want to see go where. I think it's more fun that way.
Yeah, exactly. But hey, all in all, Mariners last 2 weeks, vibes high, very high.
Yeah, you could say so. And, this can lead us into our first Mariners storyline, and we're going to sort of observe what the last 5 series the Mariners have played since April 15th say about this team. Let me throw some numbers at you of how good this team has been the last 5 series. They have a 1.48 ERA over that stretch. In that time, they've struck out 29% of their batters and walked just 7. At the plate, in that stretch, they have a 110 WRC plus, which ranks sixth in baseball. Doesn't seem like it, but yeah, they do over that stretch. It almost seems like they should have won more games than they actually did, even though they won a lot of games the last 2 weeks. they probably should have won more.
Anytime a pitching staff pitches like this, of course you're going to look and say you should win every single game. I don't know if you can win every game. Sure, there's a couple you can point to and say the Mariners should have taken that one. That game in Colorado, that one's going to stand out. Even with Demo and the fan interference whole thing, the Mariners should never have let it get to that point. You can circle that game, for example. It's hard to sweep teams, unless you're the Rockies, which the Mariners should have swept them. It's hard to sweep teams, especially when most of the teams they've been playing are pretty solid. Like Diamondbacks, reigning NL champs, Braves, best team in baseball in the American or in by regular season last year, Rangers, World Series champions. They played a lot of good teams. We know the Reds are talented. There's another, although they swept the Reds. So it's hard to pinpoint which game specifically they should have won more of, I guess, aside from that Colorado game. But it's hard to be unhappy with what they're doing right now. 5 series wins in a row. You win every series. Who can complain?
So the pitching's been unbelievable. We knew that. You dug up the offensive stats over those series. I could not. My jaw was on the floor, and I saw there over that time in Major League Baseball, the Mariners are the 6th best offense in baseball. It sure doesn't seem like it.
Yeah.
It sure looks like when we sit there and we watch them go up and strike out at an almost 30% rate at the plate, it doesn't seem like a top 10 offense, top 15 offense, top 20 offense. But compared to the rest of the league, they're 10% above league average in the last 5 series. My main takeaway, 1, the Reds and Rockies series did carry a little bit of weight. The Mariners, out of those 6 games, had 4 really good offensive games, and I think that has sort of carried the water to balance out the past week of offense the Mariners have had, which hasn't been as good. But secondly, dude, what's up with this offensive environment in Major League Baseball? It is pretty goddamn low.
This could be a whole talking point for another show. I don't know if we're getting to the point where there's going to have to be real consideration about moving the mounds back because it's so pitcher friendly these days. I don't know, but you're right that offense in baseball is down. There's no doubt about it. But if you just want to look at the Mariners over this 2-week lens, because that's what you mean when you say the Mariners are the 6th best offense in baseball, that's not total. That's over the last couple of weeks, since April 15th to be exact, when they started this streak of winning 5 straight series. But it's true. They are the 6th best offense. Like, let's go through a couple of the different stats. You mentioned they're 6th in weighted runs created plus. That's true. They're 6th in slugging percentage. They're 6th in WOBA. They're 5th in walk rate. They're 10th in on-base percentage. They're 6th in offensive F-WAR on Fangraphs. Now, there are some other things you can look at. Yes, they are still leading the league in strikeout rate over that time, which is less than ideal. They're 17th in runs scored, which is below league average in that time. There's a lot of trends about this offense that actually say, oh, they're going in the right direction. And all of this over the last couple weeks, when they've been the 6th best offense in baseball, let me remind everybody, Julio is not in full stride yet. Jorge Polanco, certainly not in full stride yet. Mitch Garver, certainly not in full stride yet. Luke Raley, who's somehow almost been forgotten about when talking about the core of this team. This guy was a 130 WRC plus guy last year. The dude was one of the best hitters in baseball in the first half last year. He hasn't hit for a lick of power yet. And in addition to that, you don't have JP Crawford and you don't have Dom Canzone. So imagine what this team can look like if they're the 6th best offense in baseball right now with all of those things going against them when everybody can get healthy. It's almost like as time goes on and the season progresses, things should get better. Jorge Polanco and Mitch Garver aren't going to hit below the Mendoza line all year with WRC pluses in the 60 to 70 range. It's just not going to happen.
Could it be that this Mariners offense, in a general sense of baseball, if we want to take multiple seasons into account, this offense might not be overly productive by the raw numbers, but then we get to the end of the year and we look at the rest of the league and they could still be above league average. Like the Jorge Polanco and Mitch Garver, based on the pitching that we've seen so far this season, could have bad years compared to their other years, and yet still, by the league average, still be good players. Like, we could certainly arrive at that point. The April production for hitters in Major League Baseball is suggesting that both Jorge Polanco and Mitch Garver are having not just bad years. I mean, they're having outlier bad years in their careers, like not even close to the low points in their careers so far. And you're like, this cannot be like, this literally cannot be that like this. They cannot just be washed players. They can't be done. They can't be toast, right? That just doesn't really make sense. Like, we'll talk about Mitch Garver a little bit more in our next storyline. But Polanco, for example, the most he had ever struck out in his career before the season was last year when he was hurt, in and out of the lineup, was 25.7%. He is at 31% this year. Guys don't just add 5% to their K rate when they turn 30. That's not very normal. So it just doesn't really make much sense. And some of these numbers could just reflect the fact that major league teams have figured out this whole pitching thing. Like, they've really figured out the best way to attack hitters, and it is really difficult for these hitters to adjust. The spin is too good, the velocity is too good, and it doesn't help that some umpires, like our special friend on Wednesday, who we'll get to also later on in this episode behind the plate, was giving Chris Sale 6 inches off the outside corner. I don't know how you're supposed to hit, right? So taking all that into encompass all of that, and over the last 2 weeks, the Mariners are still 10% better than league average. You said 6th best slugging team, right?
Mm-hmm.
Over that time. They're not even slugging 400 in that stretch. Think about that. 6th best in baseball, yet not even slugging 400. You send guys to the minors for not slugging 400. Right?
In conclusion, bring back the juice baseballs.
I'm down. That was so much fun.
Yes. And I feel like it would be balanced out a little bit better now. If you have the juice baseballs with how advanced pitching's gotten, it might still favor pitchers, to be honest. Pitching's just gotten so good that sometimes guys don't even put bat to ball. But it feels like it would balance it out more. Yeah. If it was up to me, bring the juice baseballs back. And one more point on my end about the offense. I just talked about all these guys that are not hitting their stride yet. I didn't mention Ty France either, who we've talked about. You look at his Baseball Savant page, it says he's gotten unlucky in a lot of ways, and he is hitting the ball hard. He just needs to, 1, start elevating a little bit more, and 2, have some better luck go his way, which will balance out over time. There's another guy that is not doing what we think he is at the maximum capable of doing yet. The one consistent in this lineup right now is essentially the third base platoon. Rojas for sure, but even when Urias is in there against lefties, we know he's put up some big hits and his OPS is above 800 against lefties. It's basically them. And at times, Cal Raleigh, too. Cal's had some hot stretches. Then he had this whole thing where he had to have a dental procedure, and I think it's hampered him for a couple games because he was 0 for 16 at one point since getting the dental procedure before getting a hit this weekend. So it's really just been Raleigh and third base. The rest of the team is not even close to hitting their stride yet. Mitch Haniger's been cold the last couple weeks, too. Yet, in spite of all of that, 6th best offense in baseball.
My one last observation from this 5-game stretch. So, let's just rattle off the last 3 series.
Yeah. Sorry, you said 5-game stretch.
5 series.
Yeah.
They just defeated the reigning National League champs, American League champs, and the best team in baseball. The Braves have, you can argue, been the best team in baseball for the last 3 seasons combined, right? Mm-hmm. They are really, really good. Mariners won all 3 of those series, and we can firmly stamp playoff contender on this team. Like, we thought it preseason. First couple of weeks are rocky, but this stretch confirms that. I don't know if we're quite to the World Series contender yet, but playoff contender, yeah, absolutely. No team with a pitching staff this good that has stretches like this, historic stretches like this on the mound, they rarely miss the playoffs. I mean, under 10% of the time. If you go year by year and look at the best ERA teams in baseball, they're almost always in the playoffs. And this team, I mean, if they're putting up 2.5-week stretches of a 1.48, 1.48 ERA, that's pretty historic. By the way, you want to know a little fun nugget? I was curious, some of the ERA, strikeout percentage, walk percentage, how that would compare to a pitcher's full season. Do you know one of the closest comparisons to the Mariners pitching the last 5 series over a full season from one pitcher?
You know what I like to say? Enlighten me.
2021, Jacob deGrom. Yeah, the season where, if I can fill in everybody, he had a 1.08 ERA. He struck out 45% of his batters and walked 3.
Man, you're channeling your inner Alex Mayer with a stat like that. I don't know how long that took you to dig it up.
I'm flattered with the comparison, but Alex clears me by a lot.
Yeah, he's a great Twitter follow for anybody that doesn't already follow him. He will tweet some unreal Seattle Mariners stats. But yeah, look, we know what the rotation's done. I do want to give a little bit of, or not a little bit, a good amount of credit to this bullpen too, because part of that 1.48 ERA in total over these 2 weeks is the bullpen. Starters have been great. Their ERA sits at 1.39 combined. The bullpen ERA sits at a combined 1.65. And as we know, no Matt Brash, still going to have to wait for an update on him. No Gregory Santos, still progressing his way back. It's been everybody else. Andres Munoz continues to be Andres Munoz, but we've talked about Gabe Spire, who we love, deserves a ton of credit for what he's done. He's been one of the best relievers in baseball through a month. Trent Thornton deserves a ton of credit. Somebody who basically was forgotten about all offseason. When we were talking about this bullpen in the offseason, nobody was really talking about Trent Thornton, in spite of having a good couple of months when he got over here last year. Now he's essentially, like you mentioned, taken over the bridge gap for Matt Brash and is coming in those sort of situations, has done an awesome job with it. Those three have really, really helped anchor things. And every guy in this bullpen currently, aside from Ryan Stanek, has an ERA below 3. And Stanek's one of the guys I'm least worried about. He gave up a run or two the other night. I'm sure it's going to come back down. We know how good Ryan Stanek is. The rest of the bullpen, including the guys toward the back, Cody Bolton, Tyson Miller, all have ERAs below 3. All of them.
It's pretty good.
Pretty good.
That's a pretty solid group of guys. There's no weakness on this pitching staff. And the only thing that will hamper this staff is injury. It is not going to be stuff. It is not going to be talent. It is not going to be strike throwing ability. That injury is it. If these guys stay healthy and they get a Gregory Santos back, playoff contender. Right now, playoff contender. We can almost certainly say that.
I think they're a playoff contender right now. Obviously, if they get Santos back, they take another step. And yeah, they're a playoff contender now. If they get Santos back, it just takes them a notch above where they're already at. And part of this is delusion on my end, I'm sure. And part of because I just love watching Matt Brash. I'm still trying to hold on to the somewhere between the 3 to 5% hope that maybe some positive news comes back, where if he gives it another couple weeks rest and tries to ramp it up again, maybe he can get back healthy. Of course, I'm not expecting that, but I'm trying to hold out some real hope of any light of positivity that I can, that maybe we'll see him back this year, because obviously if he gets back, bullpen takes another step.
Yeah, I really hope so. So I think we're both crossing our fingers. Then, I mean, like you said, then we can circle back on a storyline, and we could actually seriously consider if this is the best bullpen in Mariners history. We could have a little bit more fun with that. I think we both perceive that right now, but when we actually see everyone locked and loaded in that bullpen, I think that'll be a pretty fun discussion to have. Before we get to our second storyline, let's hear a word from Game Time. Summer's right around the corner, which means heading out to the ballpark in that warm weather is also around the corner. When thinking about how you're going to get your tickets to the park, you should use the Game Time app. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guaranteed, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. When you're looking for tickets to the Mariners versus A's series next weekend, when the Mariners return home, use the Game Time app. Checking it out here, looks like you can find tickets to all 3 games next weekend for under $23 each, guys, for a weekend series. That sounds pretty good. And Abe's back in town. Abe Toro, you guys got to get in the stands and go see Abe as he returns to Seattle. You can save even more money with zone deals, where you choose the section and Game Time chooses the seat. Shop smarter with the all-in pricing feature so you don't have any surprise fees at checkout. Your purchase is also covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code JUSTBASEBALL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code JUSTBASEBALL, JUSTBASEBALL, for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Okay, let's get to our second storyline. How are we feeling about Mitch Garver?
Obviously not thrilled that he's struggled so much in the first month. Obviously, we love the walk-off home run on Monday. Long term, I think he's going to be fine. I think this is just a slow start. But for a guy that is expected to be arguably the second most valuable hitter behind Julio, it has been tough to watch at times and see to him go through what he's gone through in month number 1 in Seattle.
If you're going to rank your confidence, he bounces back for the rest of the season on a scale of 1 to 10. What is it?
I'll still say 7 or 8. And I say that because if you look at Garver's splits throughout his career, March and April have historically been just about his worst month. I think his worst month is June, and that almost feels a little fluky. But it does show that after the month of April, he will often heat up as time goes on. As the weather heats up, Mitch Garver can heat up. Another reason why I think he's going to be fine, he's also such a proven hitter and has been throughout his career that to see him just totally fall off would be pretty surprising. But if you want to look at the flip side, there are some alarming numbers that we're going to dive into.
Really alarming. He's not hitting any line drives this year. You want to get on base? Hit a line drive. You know, Mitch Garver's he's a pull side fly ball hitter, but that doesn't mean you can't hit line drives. And he's hit line drives in his career. His line drive rate's like 10%. 10%.
So with that, what's your confidence level he turns it around?
Probably a 6, a little bit lower. There are some really alarming things here. Like, he is chasing way more than he ever has. Like, not even close. Like, when I said outlier bad in our first storyline, I mean, it truly is outlier bad. It is, if you look on a Savant page, it's outlier bad and quality of contact, expected batting average, expected slugging percentage, expected ISO, like all the expected quality of contact stats. His max exit velo is way down this year. So, like, there are some really concerning signs that not only is the ball not getting hit very hard, but the zone is getting expanded significantly, and on those swings, he's making significantly less contact. That is a recipe for a disaster season. All of those things combined. And it doesn't make much sense. What about T-Mobile Park turns Mitch Garver into all of a sudden a chase-happy swing and miss hitter? What about it?
So, fun fact, it doesn't. Mitch Garver is actually hitting way better at home than on the road. He currently is holding a 719 OPS at T-Mobile Park. He's got a 358 OPS on the road, which maybe that's fluky, but it is interesting considering some of the road ballparks they've been in so far. Texas, which he's very familiar with. Colorado, supposed to be a hitter's park, although the weather was bad. They've been in some road ballparks so far that shouldn't be that hard to hit in, but he hasn't hit in them. Do you think that home road thing is fluky? Because he's actually hit better in Seattle.
Maybe he'll enjoy the Crawford boxes this weekend. That would be nice. He can get a couple cheap home runs. He pops one up and hits a couple into those Crawford boxes. Because, you know, at the rate he's going, he's also like on StatCast's qualification of quote unquote meatball pitches. He's also swinging at way less of those, like the best kind of pitch to hit. He's swinging at way less. So the whole profile is messed up on what the Mariners, I think, thought they were getting in Mitch Garver. And through a month of April, he looks like a completely different hitter than the one that was in Texas last year.
But don't you think some of this should turn around? He's in the first percentile right now in expected batting average. And like you said, a bunch of the quality of contact stuff, way more drastic than it was. You could highlight a bunch of these. I'll just highlight one, and you could pick a whole different number of them. But when you look at, for example, his expected slugging, it was in the 87th percentile last year. It's in the 8th percentile right now. Don't you think some of that should turn around? That just doesn't make any sense for somebody to go from a 138 WRC plus like he did last year to now where he's at, currently holding a 143 average with 3 home runs, a 553 OPS, and a 67 WRC plus through the first month. Shouldn't
if it actually
around?
Happens, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just I'm saying, shouldn't it turn around?
If it doesn't, they should make a 30 for 30 on his season this year. I think it would be fascinating.
You know what I find fast? Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
But I think the main thing here, so he actually's hit fastballs okay, not at the rate he did last year, but he's been fine against fastballs this year, which is his bread and butter. And I think most hitters, if there's one pitch they're certainly going to hit, they hit fastballs. So when, sort of the thought that comes into my head of bat speed and worrying about his bat slowing down, I think his swings against fastballs would be, it would be noticeable, right? But he's still been fine against fastballs. So even if his bat speed is slowed down a tiny bit since last year as he gets another year into his 30s, I just don't know if we can all 100% say that, because he's done exactly nothing against any sort of spin pitch this year, any breaking pitch. Absolutely nothing.
I was going to get into it too. When you look at what he's done of all pitches not named four-seam fastballs, it's really been a struggle. Really, it's like Colton Wong levels of last year. He's seeing sliders 30% of the time right now, which is the pitch he's seeing the most of any pitch right now. He's hitting 091 against sliders. And if you look at what he's doing against sinkers, that's the pitch he's seeing the third most. He's getting sliders the most, four-seamers at second, and sinkers third. He has not gotten a single hit against the sinker yet this year. He's in 17 different plate appearances this year, seen sinkers. He doesn't have a hit against one yet. Last year, he didn't seem to have issues at all with any of this off-speed stuff or any of this spin stuff. He was best against fastballs. That's what Garver's done most of his career, is he's crushed the heater. But he held his own against all those other pitches so he could get more fastballs in the zone, and he'd take advantage of it. Right now, like you just talked about, he's still hitting fastballs for the most part. It's everything else he's struggling against. And honestly, if you want to try to speculate as to why maybe he's not crushing fastballs more, I heard Ryan Divish talk about this on Foul Territory today here on Thursday. So many of these Mariners are now getting pitched with so much spin, and teams like the Red Sox, like we saw in the first weekend, and others have this whole spin to win philosophy against the Mariners by attacking them with a bunch of breaking balls. I do wonder if guys are now late on fastballs because they're expecting spin, and Garver could be included in that. They're seeing so many breaking balls, they have to gear up for it, and then they're late on heaters.
And Garver's whole thing is pulling fastballs, and you can't pull a fastball if you're sitting spin.
Right.
So, what do you do? First of all, he has to be out there in the lineup. He's making a lot of money in Mariners standards. He's your DH. He's not going to go behind the plate. He's not going to go out and play in the field. He's going to sit in the lineup in the DH spot, and he's going to hit. And he's already gotten moved as low as 7th in the lineup. You can't drop him any further than that, because I don't know if you drop a hitter like Mitch Garver deeper in the lineup than that, just based off of how he runs and how he handles himself on the base paths. What do they do?
You just have to keep playing him. You have to bet on what you know, and you have to bet on his track record that he's going to turn this thing around. First off, I don't know if there's anybody on the bench or anybody currently in Tacoma that could really come up and make that big of a difference right now. And as a result, say to Garver, you're going to get less playing time. First off, I think that's irresponsible. But second of all, I don't think there's anybody you could pull up from AAA right now that could really take a big jump forward. You have got to bet on what you know and who he's been as a player in years past and bank that he's going to turn this thing around. Here's an example too. We just talked about how he's a slow starter a lot of the time. Let's first off see what he does in the month of May. But last year in Texas, it was flipped. He had a great April, crushed it. He had a tough May. So his first 2 months, you saw different results. June and on, he hit the ground running when he was on the field. But he had a slow April this year. He's had slow Aprils in the past. Let's see what he does in May. Let's come back to this on June 1st and see where Mitch Garver's at. If it's 2 straight months of struggling, yeah, there's going to be more alarms going off for concern in everybody's heads. But let's see what he does in May. He's gotten warmed up now. I think this doesn't get talked about and it can't be quantified. I do think coming into a new organization with a new hitting philosophy does take some time to adjust to as well. That could be a part of it. But let's see where he's at on June 1st, because you know what? He's still walking. He's still walking about 11% of the time. And it's not everything, but you have seen a little more power from him come to life over the last 7 games or so. He had the walk-off on Monday night. He started to pull a couple more baseballs. Scott Service says he's starting to like what he sees out of Garver a lot more. Maybe things will turn around. If I were to bet, again, my concern level with Mitch Garver right now is not that high. Nobody's thrilled that he had a slow April, but I think he's going to turn it around. And if you're the Mariners, you can't just sit him down after a month. You have to bet on that he's going to turn it around.
And like you said, you don't really have any other options. You're not better by putting someone else in his spot. Hey, Mike Ford asked for his release, and people were like, hey, look at that.
Yeah.
I don't think the Mariners are better with Mike Ford right now than they are with Mitch Garver. I don't think it helps him either, though, that, I mean, he was hitting cleanup at times this week. That, like, the fact that there is not enough consistent production with the sixth best WRC plus lineup in baseball the last 5 series of the season, that he still needs to move up and hit cleanup sometimes, right? Like, that's not, I don't think it's a total help for someone who's not really seeing the ball as well as other guys. And it would certainly help if Jorge Polanco or Ty France or Julio Rodriguez, or if JP Crawford was healthy, any of those guys are in the lineup and absolutely raking, and pitchers thinking about something else besides, oh, like, most of this lineup is still swinging and missing a lot, let's junk it up, right? It's sort of like what happened last year when the team was off to a slow offensive start. Most guys were struggling. So it was like, well, okay, like, don't have to really worry about anyone specifically. And for the most part, strikeout-wise, it's the same thing this year.
They really do just need one guy to truly get going. Look what happened when Julio started to have all those multi-hit games over that small stretch throughout this 5-series win streak. Started to see a lot of wins. Started to see the team change a little bit. I'm sure Julio's going to get going here soon, but you just need one more guy to get going, because if one more guy can take some of the pressure off the rest of the lineup, you're going to see contagious hitting, because these guys wear it. We've heard Service talk about this too. You know, it's on Garver right now. You know, he's probably taking it hard because he knows he's such a good hitter, and he knows what he can do for this team when he's at his best, and he knows he's not at his best right now. So if just one of these guys starts to get going, you could see a lot of difference be made throughout the lineup. So whether it's Garver, whether it's Polanco, whether it's Ty France, Haniger getting going again, somebody really just getting on a heater, it's going to help a lot.
Is there one thing that you're thinking to see from Garver's game that would necessitate a turnaround more? Would it be striking out less, hitting more home runs, hitting more line drives? What would it be?
The line drive thing is probably what's most apparent. And his fly ball rate's also down too. His ground ball rate's way up. His fly ball rate and line drive rate are down, which signals he's not hitting the ball that hard right now. I think the hard hit rates going up would be a big signal of that. The strikeouts, look, you don't want anybody striking out, but one, you can live with strikeouts if you hit the ball hard and you hit it with authority a lot. But also, Mitch Garver's never been a career 30% or above strikeout guy. I don't think that's going to last. So you could pick either one of those things. For me, it's probably hitting the ball hard.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, probably that. But I think for the most part, I just want to see some more homers. So we saw the homer on Monday. More of that. Like that is the kind of hitter he is. Like, hitting the ball in the air with authority would be great. We haven't seen it all that much this season. That swing on Monday was great. Let's see more stuff like that, because that's exactly what you want to see. Damage pitch, damage result.
For sure. Okay, as we start to transition here, let's go down on the farm. TJ, minor league standout of the week. Who you got?
Speaking of guys who are not really struggling at the plate, Harry Ford has just been taking a weed whacker to Double-A. He had a pretty bad first week, like really, really bad, like hitting under 050 bad level of Arkansas. Since then, since the 12th of April, he has a .462 on base percentage. Just Harry Ford. He has an OPS of nearly 1,000. Walking 22% of the time, striking out just 16% of the time. I wrote down 6, but I think it's 16. And then his last 9 games, he has a .533 on base and a 1,300 OPS. Like, ridiculous stuff from Harry Ford. .462 on base. Let's just put some perspective here. The kind of hitter Harry Ford has been in his minor league career. He's been about a 135 WRC plus guy in the minor leagues at all levels. He had a pretty good short stint in complex league ball at age 18 right after he got drafted. But after that, it's been around a 135 WRC plus. It's been at 176 since April 12th. In Double-A. You know, moving up a level against tougher competition, he is torching Double-A pitchers. It's cool. It's good to see. We're seeing some really good offensive performances in a tough hitting environment down there in Arkansas. So good for Harry. Congrats to the Brit in the Mariners organization.
it's hard going from high A to double A. It's the hardest jump aside from the big leagues. So to see Harry Ford start slow in that first week like he did, it's not that surprising. Cole Young's not lighting the world on fire in Arkansas yet either. Those guys are so young. They're jumping up to the hardest level of the minors. They're making the biggest jump. But now to see Harry Ford coming around, he's getting back to the player he's always been in the minors, and it's awesome to see. So Harry Ford didn't take home any superlatives this month for the Mariners. There are a couple guys who did, and I wanted to highlight them for my Mariners minor leaguer, or I should say minor leaguers, for our on the farm segment this week, because there were some guys who took home some awards. They gave out their players of the month. Caleb Cali, who most of you probably don't know that name yet, 16th round pick last year out of Arkansas, crushed it in Modesto through the first month. He was named the Mariners minor league player of the month. Jonathan Diaz was named the Mariners minor league pitcher of the month, who had an awesome month in Tacoma. And then Jesse Wainscott was named the reliever of the month in the Mariners organization. So just wanted to highlight a couple of those guys. Cali, he's leading the Cal League in average right now. He's hitting over 400 through the first month, which is crazy because when you look at this Modesto lineup, who are you going to think of? You're going to think of all the blue chip prospects, obviously. Colt Emerson, Ty Pete, Johnny Farmelo, Lazaro Montes, Michael Arroyo. It's so easy to get caught up with all them. And then you remember, oh, there's other guys in this lineup that are still crushing the baseball, including the guy that now just won Mariners minor league player of the month in Cali. So pretty cool to see on that end. And with Jonathan Diaz, a guy who has big league time and had an awesome month in Tacoma, another positive sign for the Mariners, showing that while last year they needed a lot of pitching depth to get them through the year, they may actually have some this year, because all of a sudden when Brian Wu gets back, you'll have Emerson Hancock, you'll have Jonathan Diaz, you'll have Levi Stout. Those guys will all presumably be in AAA. And then as the year goes on, as we've talked about, there's guys like Logan Evans and Reed Van Scooter who could be available too. So to see some real depth being built in the Mariners system pitching wise, it's awesome.
Yeah, and it was a reward. Did you mention Dallas Keuchel?
Oh, and Dallas Keuchel. Yeah. There's another.
Right. Yeah. And something that was a worry almost doesn't seem like quite as much. Maybe not an offer in the upside of a top 100 prospect at that level, but still, like, guys who can eat up big league innings. It's cool for those guys. I mean, how do you pitch that to that Modesto lineup? So, like, for example, like, this is a deep cut. I was looking up some kid I saw in the West Coast League, and the West Coast League is played here on the West Coast, Summer Collegiate League in Oregon, Washington, Canada, etc. And there's this kid, Jacob Sharp, who in the first summer I was down here, I was like, I checked the box score. He had a pretty unbelievable year down there in the West Coast League. He played at UNLV. He's in Modesto now, too, and he's also got an OPS of almost 1,000. You've ever heard of Jacob Sharp?
I'm going to be honest with you, not really. And I feel like I'm a Mariners ball knower.
Right. But he's almost got a 1,000 OPS down there, too. He's slugging like well over 600.
Aside from Norfolk, is that the best team in the minor leagues?
It might be.
It's at least the second best offense in the minor leagues behind Norfolk.
Like league adjusted, I assume.
Yeah.
Probably. Yeah. To be honest, if you're any like 18 or 19-year-old arm, I'm not sure how you face that lineup. Like that seems like a bit of a tough task for someone who's probably working on his slider command. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, first round pick, $4 million signing bonus internationally, 1,000 OPS. Oh, wait, and then this is the 8th guy in the lineup. Oh, he just won Organizational Player of the Month.
Yeah. Oh, and you know what we didn't even mention either is Luis Suisbel, who was on our minor league award winner, like on this show. We gave some On the Farm awards to last year, who's still in Modesto and is also still crushing the baseball. There is literally no weakness in that lineup 1 through 9. I'm not saying Modesto's some tourist attraction, but if you're in the area and you're a Mariners fan, I would go and see a Modesto Nuts game. If the Cal League stretched out more and got closer to the Pacific Northwest, I'd go and see them. And I'll tell you what, when this whole group gets up to Everett, I'm definitely going to see these guys.
Okay, always good stuff. Let's get to our Russell Wilson Umpire of the Week. So this umpire that we've decided on this week, mentioned him a little bit earlier, will be very familiar to most Mariners fans watching Wednesday's baseball game against the Braves. Congratulations to Nick Lentz for somehow inventing his own strike zone. I mean, congratulations. I'm taking a look at Nick Lentz's umpire scorecard, Lyle. Not only did Mr. Lentz, who was behind the plate again for Wednesday's Mariners-Braves game, only an 80% called strike accuracy. 80%. So you know how they do like the red of what they of the like perceived strike zone is based on the calls he made, right? The red box outside the actual square box. Well, he essentially just ignored the top rail of the strike zone and instead stretched the strike zone out horizontally like this on both sides. Where he's like, you know what? I'm actually going to flip. Let's take the rectangle of the strike zone and let's flip it like this. Let's flip it around 90 degrees. And that's going to be my strike zone today. Because I think that's what Nick Lentz decided to do when Chris Sale would flip a backdoor slider 6 inches off the plate that was called strike to multiple Mariners hitters. And to Sale's credit, he took pretty good advantage of that spot.
Nick Lentz had an 80% accuracy score on strikes on Wednesday. That's 8% below league average, which, spoiler, is bad. He gave the Atlanta Braves a run and a half yesterday. These umpire scorecards track out how many runs your umpiring and your game calling favors a certain team. He gave nearly a run and a half to the Atlanta Braves. The Braves probably still win that game yesterday, but get the automated strike zone or the challenge system up to the big leagues, man. Like, it's time. I'm sick of it. Every week we do this. Like, we almost put ourselves through self-torture every week doing this segment. What is it going to take to get the challenge system up here?
It would solve a lot of problems. We'd need to figure out how to fill this time in this segment. What do we do instead? Our Russell Wilson robocall of the week?
Ooh, I kind of like that.
You know, it honestly still works out, though, with Russ because he is kind of a robot.
Oh, he's robotic. His answers are extremely calculated to every question he gets asked. So, yeah.
So instead of being Russell Wilson levels of cringe, you're just Russell Wilson levels of robotic, where you call a pitch like 2 feet outside that's clearly not a strike. And then everyone laughs at you when the scoreboard corrects you and shows you how far outside the pitch actually was.
Yeah, there we go. If we get to robo-umps one day or the challenge system, we can change the segment of this show. And you know, I really hope we do, because that will mean there is some technology implemented to balls and strikes calling. It's time to get it right, people. We're not watching any more Nick Lentz outings. It's not fair to the hitters. It's not fair to the pitchers. It's ridiculous. Man. All right. On a better note, let's move on and close out the show with Speak Your Mind. So what are you thinking about this week?
Well, I'm feeling a little nostalgic this week, Lyle, because I feel like a chapter in our childhood is closing. So we're big Star Wars fans, obviously. We've talked quite a bit about Star Wars on this segment, but I seem to recall when we've talked about the Star Wars cartoons on this segment, it's been mostly me, not you, because you haven't seen as many of the cartoons. Well, they're ending as of Wednesday. They ended the final episode of all of the Star Wars prequel cartoons. Prequel meaning before episode 4, before New Hope. They're all done. All of the prequel era content is done. And, you know, it's kind of sad because I think you and I think like that's all, you could argue that's the best era of sort of Star Wars content they ever made. Whereas all the stuff around the first 3 episodes, like the 3 episodes themselves, but then all the shows in and around them. And now they're done, unfortunately, with the last episode of The Bad Batch, which is a like play off of the Clone Wars. That went through 3 seasons and it's now done after all these episodes. I still haven't seen the finale, by the way, so don't worry, I won't spoil anything, but it's kind of sad. I'm kind of sad because it has been some of my favorite television I've ever watched, and it's now no longer.
I'm probably overdue to watch these. Again, I've seen some of the Clone Wars. I've seen a couple episodes of Bad Batch. Mostly I've watched the live action stuff for Star Wars, which is a lot of content, which is a lot of shows and movies. But I haven't watched as much of the Clone Wars and Bad Batch. It's on my list of things to watch, and I really should. I need to carve out some time to do it.
It is a lot. If you tally up all the Clone Wars episodes and all of the Bad Batch episodes, I mean, you're well over 100. I don't know the final tally, but there are a lot. There are a lot of episodes, so I don't think you'll lack the resources to go find some good ones.
Right. I know there's also people out there that say not every episode of the Clone Wars is absolutely necessary to watch, and there's lists out there saying here's every necessary episode to go and consume. So maybe I'll do that and then watch Bad Batch or something like that.
So now we just get to wait for the next episodes on Disney, which are all way in the future. So, yeah, but
and
like
that's. And what is the next piece of Star Wars content to come out? Is the new season of Andor? Is it Mando?
It's a good question. I think it's Andor. It's Andor. I'm not totally sure. The next thing, like actually on the timeline, I think is Andor, which technically counts. I guess that technically does count as prequel, but a prequel cartoon stuff is no, actually no, that's not prequel. Because that is
it's post episode 3.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know what that counts as.
Yeah, I don't know what that counts as, but it is kind of a unique show in of its own. So
right.
None of the goofy Star Wars characters. It's actually seems like it has some semblance of real life personality in it.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I've been itching to talk about this. What is it going to take? This is my Speak Your Mind. What is it going to take for people that have a platform and decide to talk about baseball to actually educate themselves on what in the world they're talking about when you decide to dive into it? If you don't know what I'm talking about, it was another First Take episode with Stephen A. Smith and Chris Russo going in on a baseball topic on the subject of Mike Trout getting injured, only to have Stephen A. Smith essentially rip into him for 2.5 minutes about why he's essentially soft and how are you always injured? This is baseball. This isn't boxing. It's not UFC. It's baseball. How are you always injured? As if Mike Trout was battling through a sore foot or something. No, he tore his meniscus in his knee. Stephen A. Smith, the same guy who missed 2 months of shows because he had shoulder surgery, when he does half his shows remotely, decides to trash on Mike Trout for quote unquote always being injured. I beg people that have a platform and decide to talk about baseball to educate themselves on what they're talking about.
There's a lot of layers to this. First of all, Stephen A. obviously he doesn't watch a lot of baseball. He focuses on the NBA and the NFL, as he should. Those are the moneymakers. That's what ESPN and more specifically First Take focuses on. That's his show. It's his namesake on the show. He has almost become bigger than the show itself. We've seen that with his podcast and his social media presence online. He is essentially an independent personality now. He draws on name alone. And because of that, he can get away with lazy takes, right? Because regardless of what he says, even if he's nails the Trout take 100%, then like it's still gonna generate like a bunch of feedback always. But as you know, with with shows like First Take, they're not going to talk about Mike Trout unless Stephen A. is ripping him. They wouldn't talk about, oh, we feel so bad for Mike Trout. They wouldn't have said a word about it if it wasn't going to be ripping him. And I think that's why, people get turned off of First Take and don't watch as much anymore. I'm sure they're doing fine, but television's heyday is well past now. And the second part of this is you feel like, do you remember, did Russo say anything notable in response to that?
Not that got publicly torn apart.
Because you feel like the baseball guy that Russo is supposed to be would have actually responded and said something rational in defense of Mike Trout, and that's how that show is set up. Stephen A. says one thing, Russo responds with the opposite thing, so the two can argue at that. But to be honest, based on some of Russo's takes, and ever since he's been on ESPN more and more, I wouldn't be shocked if he said something stupid as well. So, I just don't know what else we expect. It stinks that that baseball's sort of appearance on these sort of shows are only in a negative connotation and never in a positive one. Probably the only time they've talked baseball this year is this. And then when Shohei got caught in a gambling thing. That's it. Probably. They're probably not talking about the Mariners pitching staff. Oh, look at this historic run for the Mariners. 18 earned runs in their last 18 games. Isn't it amazing, Chris?
Yeah.
Mad Dog? No. No, they probably didn't mention that once. The name Seattle Mariners probably has not come up on that show ever. Ever? I'll go with ever versus the field. You can take my money. But that's why I'm glad things like this exist, where we can, sit down, have a rational discussion, and we're not forced to fire off hot takes to keep someone clicking through channels to keep their eyes locked on us. Like, oh, Stephen A. got a hot take about Mike Trout. Oh my God.
I simply propose, if First Take or any of these national shows are going to decide to talk about baseball, bring on the people that actually know baseball. If you're going to do a Mike Trout segment on First Take, let me preface this by saying they would never do this. They would never have airtime without Stephen A. off the air unless he was actually out for vacation or sickness. But if you're going to talk about Mike Trout on the show, get Stephen A. off the air, bring in Jeff Passan, bring in Carl Ravitch, bring in whoever else is on ESPN that is qualified to talk about baseball, that has a baseball background, specifically Passan, and let them talk about it. Don't have Stephen A. go on and say, well, you should tough it out through a torn meniscus, because that's when it looks ridiculous. ESPN might not prioritize baseball anymore, but they have baseball people. If you're going to talk about Mike Trout, why don't you get the baseball experts on to talk about baseball?
They might not have baseball that much longer, though, right?
Not much longer, but while they have it, they should bring on their experts. Although I don't think Passan's going anywhere anytime soon.
No, but I thought, what about the media rights? Do I have that right?
Those may go away. Yeah, like that deal is on the brink of coming to an end.
Yeah.
So we'll see where that goes. But again, you have baseball people at the network. Let them talk about baseball. When you have the NFL and the NBA topics, let Stephen A. do whatever he wants. But he very clearly is not tuned into baseball. And if you're trying to rip somebody for tearing their meniscus, like, what are we doing?
Yeah, like, was Stephen A. watching the Knicks game or watching Mike Trout's press conference?
Right.
Question answered.
There you go. And I do genuinely feel bad for Mike Trout while we're on the segment. It sucks. I know he's in our division, in the Mariners division. I know he kills the Mariners all the time, but guy's modern day Mickey Mantle. It doesn't matter what division you're in. You don't want to see a guy like that injured. Baseball is meant to have its best players on the field. And I just wish, for Trout's sake, he could stay healthy. I feel awful that it's been such a struggle for him, but I'm sure he's going through it. His press conference, yeah, you could see how caught up he was, like, choked up he was. It was hard on him. It's been hard on him. So it sucks that he's going to miss more time. But
he's alone on an island in that franchise and continuing to sort of, carry the Angels flag, and it's not getting paid back for him. So we'll see.
I do wish he'd just demand a trade. Maybe this upcoming offseason, maybe he'd finally do it. Who knows? Maybe he never will. I'm just trying to hope that he will, for the sake of the baseball world getting to see him in the playoffs. Oh, that's another thing that Stephen A. said. Stephen A. tried to pin this whole thing as because Mike Trout didn't demand out, this is karma, which is another ridiculous thing that he said.
Yeah, he probably also thinks Mike Trout is a loser because he's never made the playoffs. He's not a winning player.
Well, he's made the playoffs once.
How many playoff games has he won?
Well, that's a different story.
Loser talk, Lyle.
Yeah, per Stephen A.
But that, again, so that's why you have the actual baseball person on there, and Russo. Out of any of the quote-unquote baseball people you'd have on there, like, Passan makes his appearances on First Take, but in terms of guys who actually sit there and host the whole show, it should be Russo who comes to the table and actually, tries to promote the game. But I know that's not what Chris Russo does anymore.
Isn't he the same one that tried to, a year or so ago, call Mike Trout overrated?
Probably.
So, yeah. In conclusion, there are plenty of other very good places to consume baseball content, just maybe not on First Take.
Yeah, I concur with that.
Yeah. All right. On that note, that'll just about wrap up this edition of the Marine Layer podcast. You guys know the drill. If you want to listen to the full form podcast, make sure you're downloading our episodes. Make sure you're leaving a 5-star review, leave a written review. That's all on the audio side. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, leave a like, leave a comment, all that stuff across the video platform. On social media, we're on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube Shorts at Marine Layer Pod. That's TJ. I'm Lyle. As always, we thank you guys for tuning in. We'll talk to you soon.